I could hire an expert. I don't have to know it all. I don't have to, and I definitely don't recommend that you ignore that part, because every single time that you ignore, it comes back to you, and you pay a lot higher price later down the road.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Kasman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you're enjoying this show, do us a little favor and leave us a rating and review. It helps us get more feedback on what's working for you so we can keep doing those things. But also, if there's something that you're missing or something we can do to help you on your investing journey, we want to hear about it so this show can work harder to help you with your investing goals. And listen, if this is your first time listening to this show, or you just haven't done so for some reason, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, we've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Adrian Danila. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to kasmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to kasmancapital.com and click on the Mastermind button today. Adrian Danila embarked on his remarkable property management odyssey back in 2003 as a part-time groundskeeper. Now, for over a decade, Adrian has taken the helm of services departments, overseeing maintenance, operations, capital projects, and renovations for portfolios encompassing over 32,000 apartment homes. Now, beyond his professional pursuits, Adrian's passion for networking and mentoring is palpable. He dedicates himself to helping others ascend their career ladder, and he also is the host of the Multifamily Chronicles podcast. Let's welcome to the show, Adrian Danila.
John, thank you for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you too, Adrian. So I went over your bio at a very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Fill the gaps?
Yes,
so
sir.
A little bit about my background, right?
Yes.
2003. Well, I'm gonna go a little bit further back, right? So I left my home when I was 14 years old, went to high school. I lived as an intern for 4 years, so I just kind of learned about life, by default, parents not being around. So I just kind of learned to be self-sufficient. Went to law school, graduated law school. This all happened in Romania, right, in the 1990s. Graduated in 1999. In 2003, I had an opportunity to move to the United States. I took the opportunity. I came to the country without actually speaking any English. My vocabulary consisted of like 30 to 50 words, most of them that I wouldn't really use in this conversation. And here I am starting a brand new life. What am I gonna do? So I started doing some odd jobs, associating myself with, other Romanians, just, working here, working there, as a helper, up until 6 months in, I secured a part-time groundskeeper job at apartment community, and this has become my career. That part-time turned into a full-time, moved up, to a technician, service manager, regional maintenance director. My first gig as a director was with Greystar management. Greystar, now over 700,000 units worldwide, not just nationwide. Imagine they were like the 7th or the 11th company, largest company in the United States, just so you could imagine how small they were back in the day. So this is like 2006 and 7. And then I spent a few years after the recession back at a site level, managing, some high-level assets for them. And then after the recession we recovered, I moved on. I worked for Cortland Partners, and then from Cortland Partners, I got another regional director job with Balfour Beatty Communities, very well known company, about 50,000 units managed. And then I moved to ECI, and then I moved to Burston for a short while. And then I went from Burston, I went to a company that does maintenance services lessons. So I went on a vendor site for about a year. And then I came back as a as a vice president of maintenance and facilities for a company called PMG. This is at the beginning of this year. Their portfolio consisted of 30,000 apartment homes, spread across 3 states, Texas, Arizona, and Nevada. And that's kind of in a nutshell my history. They got bought out by RPM leaving, and then RPM leaving 3 months in, they decided the transition was over. They were going a different direction. And I made the decision to not go back as a full-time employee looking for employment. And I started my own company. So I'm in process of building a lot of verticals, building services for property management companies as a vendor, being an operator for 20 years. There's a lot of gaps that I could fill, right? And there's a lot of services that I could build for them. So that's kind of a short but long version of my history, right? Going way back.
Adrian, I appreciate you sharing that, right? So coming from Romania, moving to the States while you were a teenager, looking at some odds and ends jobs, and finally getting a job as a part-time groundskeeper, and essentially elevating from that position through property management, right? Working for some major companies like Greystar and others. And now you're kind of focusing on your own thing, taking your 20 years of operations experience and looking to help other investors as well. One thing that jumps out to me is, like, you talked about being 14, kind of on your own and kind of making things happen, moving to the United States. When you first moved to the United States, did you have family here, friends? Did you have a plan? Were you planning on going to school? Like, what was the vision? What was the plan when you first made that move?
So I actually had, John, I had no one in the United States. And just for accuracy, right? The part where I moved to the United States, I was already 27, 28 years old. I left my home, right? My home village, because I studied at a high school in the city capital of Romania, in Bucharest. But to go back to your original question, I didn't have anyone. What happened is, I got married in 2001, and I had a cousin that lives in Canada since 1989. And he kept asking me, man, you have to apply for this visa lottery. Visa lottery is a US program that, brings people from all over the world. Basically, it's a lottery. Like, you put your name in a hat and they pull 50,000 names out of the hat every year. And he convinced me to apply. My wife even told me, she said, no, I don't think this is a lottery. Like, they just check your resume and your work history and they handpick. It's not a lottery. Like, we can't stand any chance, right? I was a legal counselor for a government back then. She was a teacher. They don't need, United States people like us, right? Because it's a totally different culture and system. So I said, look, let's just apply, right? And the funny thing is, she's the one that won. And because we were married, I qualified, right? So we came in, I knew no one. Luckily for me, my parents lived in a village with a family that had their children living in the United States. They went the same way they won the visa lottery. And they've been in the United States for like 5-6 years at a time. So my dad went to the family and asked them, hey, would you please help my kids? Would your son take them in and help them, like, get their paperwork, whatever, just get them started, right? It's a new country. It's a new language. Like, you don't just like show up to a place without knowing anything. And luckily for us, they said yes. So we came, they helped us with the paperwork, submitting our paperwork for Social Security and so on and so forth. And we stayed with them for about like 3 or 4 months until we found our own place. And, we started like, my wife got a full-time job. 6 months in, I got my part-time groundskeeper job. So we had enough to, to pay for rent. But that's kind of the history there. Yes.
I always love hearing those stories, man. Just it's so refreshing, and this notion of the American dream, and you hear these stories of people coming to the country and not knowing the language and not having many connections, and I just love to hear it. Right, it just gives us a sense of accomplishment and possibilities, and you were able to come here, finding a job as a part-time groundskeeper and leverage that opportunity into a 20-year career. So let's talk about that a little bit, right? So it's interesting talking to you because most people come from the investment side, the operator side that we talk to, right? They're the investor. You came from not just the property management side, but really the construction and the maintenance side of things. What's one thing you wish people knew about the maintenance side or that portion of the business that you see so many investors and operators missing when it comes to running an effective apartment building?
Yeah, that's such an amazing question. And I'm super passionate about the subject. I'm going to tell you why. For the most part, property management companies at the very top, they're ran by numbers people, right? People that have a strong financial education. So they're looking at everything from a numbers perspective. Now, as when you're thinking maintenance, you're thinking that that's a cost, right? So what happens with cost? You have to keep it down, you have to trim it. So there's always not enough resources for maintenance. Now, I wish that investors and people at a very high, at the top of the organization will look at maintenance and understand that this departments can bring so much value. Like you could make so much more money just by properly investing and properly taking care of your properties versus saying, we can spend money on this, we can spend money on that. And I'm not talking about a wish list, I'm talking about just basic preventative maintenance items. So I wish they would understand and look at it like, hey, we're gonna invest this amount of money, and the return on the investment, it's going to be tremendous. Like it's gonna be tenfold, honestly, just because I've seen it. And I was in situations throughout my career where companies really understood, right? They appreciated, they gave us the proper resources, and with very little, we came up with some amazing results for the company.
Yeah, you mentioned the preventative maintenance that can add value to an apartment community. Give us maybe a couple of those things. Like, what should owners be doing from a preventive maintenance standpoint?
They should maintain, first of all, the HVAC systems, especially in the South. They're like the heart of your multifamily unit, because you can be living in a South in 100-degree plus temperatures with maybe humidity that goes up to 95%. So you have to have working ACs, no matter what. Like that's the number one priority in the South. Everybody wrestles every single hot season. So keeping your HVACs properly clean, the coils clean, change filters on time, checking pressure levels, checking for leaks, like those basic things that you could do to prolong the life of the unit and prevent like emergency after hour calls are the game changer. Just that one thing, right? Just doing HVAC preventive maintenance. If you're gonna extend that to appliances, right? And you make sure that your refrigerator coils are clean, that there's no ice building up, there's no leaks. The same thing with the other appliances, like do a test run with them. Do something that's preventative. Maybe changing a ice maker filter. Again, like things that are not out of this world, they're not very expensive, but they could actually bring peace of mind. And actually, you go from a reactive mode to a proactive mode. So in other words, instead like waiting for the phone to ring and say, hey, we have an issue, the AC is not working, the fridge is not working, you take the proactive approach to where you prevent those things from happening. And there's value in that too, a lot of it.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of things that I think are really great. And as we're recording this, the weather's starting to change. So people are starting to go through a lot of these things. But you talk about the HVAC systems, right? If you can focus on one thing, the HVAC systems will be your number one priority. Taking a look at the coils, making sure that those are cleaned, making sure that there are no leaks, making sure that the pressure is accurate, making sure that you're changing the filters. Same thing with kind of the appliances, taking a look at those refrigerators, looking at those coils as well, looking at the ice makers, and making sure those things you're taking care of it now preventively so you can prolong the life of it. Do you do that annually? Do you do that every 6 months? Do you just send kind of a maintenance tech to do that? What would you recommend most apartment owners do?
My recommendation will be ideally quarterly, but now we all understand challenges with staff shortages and everything. Everything's hard. It's hard to find qualified people to do that, even like people with basic knowledge, right? Honestly. So even if you do it twice a year and you do it right to where you clean the coils and everything, that should be super sufficient for you to have a peace of mind and then to prolong the life of those units. Ideally quarterly, but twice a year will be still very, very good, because honestly, at an institutional level, there's many apartment communities out there that are missing it. Like they're not doing it even once a year. So twice a year, it's already kind of like a whole lot than zero. It beats the heck out of zero is what I say.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, especially with like refrigerators, just as an example. I mean, I just had to buy one at my home, and those are not cheap, right? You're talking thousands of dollars typically, even for a lower end model, to get a new refrigerator. So to take the time and have a service tech kind of go through and check those coils, it could extend it, maybe a year or two or beyond. So it's very helpful to save on those costs, particularly if you find yourself replacing or having a lot of service for the HVAC systems or service for new appliances or buying a lot of appliances. So I know for us, when we look at our numbers, we're always trying to take a look at, okay, what do we have this month? What came up? And if we start to see some of those trends, that's when we start to say, okay, well, hey, what do we need to do to try to get ahead of this so this doesn't continue to be an issue? So I think it's a really, really great tip. Talk to me more about the numbers things. I think you make a really good observation that most of property management and investors, it's about the numbers, right? It's about the financials, it's about returns. But for you coming from the property management side of things, more the maintenance side of things, you're trying to make sure you're doing what's best for the actual physical property. So what are some other things that you see, or maybe there's I don't want to say a disconnect, but some things that you wish people knew about property management from a construction or a maintenance standpoint?
It's the education overall, right? In general, managers and the higher you go up the chain, they don't have a maintenance background. They don't have a maintenance education. They don't properly understand maintenance. And I'm going to tell you one of the myths that, we're running up against in multifamily is that everybody is looking for certified HVAC techs, which in all reality is like EPA certified 608. That's a booklet that's like 30, 40 pages long. You could hand it to any person in this world. If they memorize the information right there, they'll be prepared to take the test and pass it. That doesn't actually give them any actual knowledge of troubleshooting. And everybody says we're looking for certified techs. By a certified tech doesn't mean that they're experienced. Anybody, they don't have to be a tech. They don't have to work in maintenance. Anybody could read that book, pass the test, and become an EPA certified person, right? It doesn't mean that they actually know troubleshooting. So this is one of the myths that we're actually fighting inside our industry, within our industry, with leaders. So another thing that I wish they would have focused on, right? And there's a huge opportunity for us. It's how we promote service managers. So typically, your typical situation at the property is you have a three or four technicians and a service manager, let's say on a larger property, like 500 apartment homes. And then something happened with a service manager. He moves on, he gets fired, or he's just not around anymore. Well, the first thing that a manager would look for is they're looking at the existing team, how many techs we have. And they're typically picking up the hardest working tech, and they handing them the keys and say, hey, good luck to you. Now you've been promoted. So think about it this way. I want for everybody to picture this, okay? If you were to hand your money to a financial advisor, right? Someone that's been managing portfolios up to like 60 million, $100 million, right? You would consider that a qualified person, correct? Would you trust them to manage your money? If they have a portfolio like $100 million, probably the answer is yes. I will assume, right? Now, what we do right here, we hand the keys to a $100 million assets to a person that has no financial background, no management training, and we ask them, we wish them the best of luck. This is absolutely insane. Like, how could you do that? Like, there's no other industry that I know of that puts so much responsibility on someone that has no formal management training or experience, like completely zero experience. They just push them up and they say, okay, you figure it out right now. This is not a small thing, right? You have to, it takes years to gain that type of training. So I wish people will realize that when you hand the keys over for a 60, 70, $80 million to someone that has no formal experience, you're going to get what you pay for, at least for the time being, right? And you, in most cases, in a lot of cases, you set people up for failure, because that is not a job that you could learn like on the job for the most part. You could, but a very few people can learn it fast and can learn it to do it at a very high level. Most people can't.
Yeah, you make a really good point there. And it's not limited to property management. I've seen this in different fields as well, where again, they find someone who's working hard and they promote them, even though they haven't actually trained them to be a manager or how to do the next job. And you start running into issues. And in this case, I think one of the big differences is like, that's typically I don't want to say a smaller account, but it's not as drastic as here's a $50 million apartment community that we just, made this person the head maintenance guy and they've never done this before. We haven't trained them properly, and just good luck, right? So I got two questions. One, let me go back to your earlier point about the certified tech, because we actually just did an interview talking to someone who focuses on kind of an app to help people in the HVAC systems get certified. So I love your point that just because they're certified and they're certified techs, that doesn't mean that they have experience. And that's a misnomer that I think a lot of people miss. So you certainly want to make sure that they're experienced, not just certified. I mean, certainly the certification carries some merit, but you're looking for someone who actually knows how to troubleshoot, who has the experience, not just a piece of paper saying they studied 30 pages and passed a test, right? So I think it's really important to understand. But your point here on kind of the maintenance tax, I guess most investors and owners and operators don't have the full, vision or view of what happens on the property management side, right? We're told, hey, this is your person, this is going to be your lead, here's your regional, contact, here's your on-site PM, here's your maintenance person. And they kind of make changes. And obviously, if you see something, you can say it. What can we do in that aspect? Are there questions we can ask? Are there ways to maybe set up that maintenance tech for success, so that even if the company hasn't trained them, we can sit there and come up with either parameters or a game plan? But what can we do to maybe have a little bit more control over the outcome?
I think that investors had to be involved with third-party management at a deeper level, even if they self-manage. Like, it's not about not trusting your management company. It's about educating yourself in what it takes. And for example, I could think of a service, right? I could be myself, and there's many other professionals in the industry, right? They have the same background as I do. I'm not a uniquely qualified individual. I wish investors would reach out and say, to people like me, will say, look, help us understand from the due diligence process until we actually hand this over to a third-party management company. Help us understand what it takes, where the kinks are, what can we do proactive, so we're not ending up in a reactive situation. I know that these relationships are a lot, based on trust, but then because of the staff shortages, property management companies have limited resources. Even the larger companies, right? This might come as a shock to you. 40, 50, 60,000 apartment homes managed, they have serious difficulties finding and keeping qualified candidates. So that's a thing that investors could, maybe find someone that's it's a leader in the industry, or he works on an operations side, or has background, depending on their size. And you don't have to hire a person like me full-time. They're individuals that could work like as a consultant, right? How about if I consult this for you? How about if you fly me out to Denver, Colorado, or to Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee, and I just do an assessment for you. First of all, a mechanical assessment for a day or two to assess the physical state of your company or the asset that you want to buy. Okay, and secondly, do like maybe quarterly visits and visit and assess this, not just from that financial standpoint and from a visual standpoint, right? I'm sure that investors do that. They do investor visits. But remember that, most of the investor visits are guided visits. They're not like, hey, I show up and I just like, take me there or take me there. It's a guided tour, right? You announce your presence, and the property management, company sets up a tour. They clean up a few vacant ready units. They make sure that they're looking really good. They're taking you over there. I like the more of a approach of being just like impromptu. Hey, I'm gonna show up tomorrow, and I'm gonna be looking at some things. They could have someone that has maintenance background to team up with them on a consulting basis. If you're not a large company, you can't afford someone full-time, pay them for their time for a day or two, do site visits with you. I think that'll be very valuable. And also, it's educational, right? It's educational. That investor, if they walk this property with an expert, someone that has 10, 15, 20, 30 years background in maintenance, they could learn a lot about, which they don't know, and they don't have to know. But that's the reason why, expert matters exist, right? They're great on, like, you're a great investor, so you're great with, investing your money. But then for the other stuff, you should be able to put something on a side, some funds to say, I could hire an expert. I don't have to know it all. I don't have to, and I definitely don't recommend that you ignore that part, because every single time that you ignore, it comes back to you, and you pay a lot higher price later down the road.
Yeah, really great points, Adrian.
Other issues.
Yeah, really great points, right? You don't have to be the expert yourself, but you want to rely on people who absolutely know. And someone like yourself, people who are experts, consultants, you don't have to have them full time on your team, but you certainly want someone who understands that side of the business and can help you. And you talked about being deeper into the property management side of things, understanding it, educating yourself, having deeper conversations with your PM team. I think all of those are really good solutions. I want to talk a little bit about the due diligence process, because you kind of touched on this, and I think it's really important, particularly for those investors who are in the acquisitions mode and maybe doing their first acquisitions or their first large acquisitions. So I have kind of 3 questions. I want to start with, when you're on site and you're looking at a property, for due diligence, what exactly are you looking at? Like, what are you paying attention to when you go into a property? What are you looking for?
Short answer, everything, right? But I want to and give you some meat on the bone, right? Because just looking at everything, that's not really a good answer. But I want to be very specific. You will want to look at the mechanicals and the mechanical part, the shape of your appliances and HVAC systems mainly, because those are the most the largest ticket items, right? The most expensive. Water heaters as well, and then look for structural issues, right? If you have building settling, if you have subfloor issues, things of that nature. Look for also for mold situations, for air circulation issues. Those could come, very expensive. I know that there are certain states in which, they have very strict regulations for mold remediation. Texas comes to mind, right? You can't just like go cut out a piece of drywall, clean it up, and like patch it up with a new drywall. It's a whole entire process, and that costs money, right? So everything translates into money. It's best to set up funds aside and do this process the proper way. So even if you buy the asset and you're finding several issues with it, right? At least you know what kind of cost, so you could properly budget. Because I'm seeing this over and over again with investors, like, buying assets. The due diligence process is not thorough, or they think it's thorough, they hand it over to a third party. It's not necessarily capturing all the information that it should. Based on that, they put together a budget, which is not realistic because it's missing things. And as they start running the asset, things are starting to pop up, right? So this ideal situation that they thought that they were in, they raised money, they, made this great sales pitch to their investors, they're contributing to, buying the asset, is not as appealing anymore. And you have to explain, right? It puts them into a defensive situation, and it makes actually the people, the operators at the site level, the site teams, in almost an impossible situation. They have to do something with nothing, and they're not magicians. They're not Superman and Superwoman. They have to have the proper funds in order to resolve. So I think a very proactive beforehand approach, it's important, and I think very helpful would be for investors to be personally involved. Even if you hire a third-party company, don't rely just on their assessment. Maybe get like another third party, consultant, especially on a mechanical issues and maintenance, that they could, come with a neutral point of view. They don't have a horse in a game, because they're not going to be the ones managing the asset. A consultant that comes, looks at the issues and, provides you with a report and says, these are the systemic issues that I'm finding. Just want to make you aware. So either, you budget appropriately, or maybe you say like, this is going to cost so much that the deal doesn't make sense anymore. I've seen that side too. I've seen that side too, where like third-party managers, literally, they had one person doing a drive-through in their truck. They drove the property, and they told the client, they told the investor, everything looks good. And I can't even tell you how much cost came down the road, because they weren't, great looking properties. Like, a lot of stuff was missed. So it's extremely important that investors are taking this seriously. It is for their own good, right? Long term.
Yeah. Adrian, what I heard you say was, first of all, you're looking at everything, right? So people ask questions sometimes like, well, how many units should I look at? You know, should it do 10%, 20%, 50%? What I heard you say was look at everything, which is what,
100%.
they should do, right?
100%.
Look at everything. But obviously you can't make note of every little thing that pops up, right? You're going to have notes for days if you do that. What you're focusing on is the big ticket items, right? The HVAC systems, the appliances. You're looking at structural issues. You're looking at mold issues, air circulation. You're looking at things that are going to cost you money to fix. And then you're also trying to make sure that your business plan is accurate. If you go in and you plan on renovating the kitchens or you're renovating the bathrooms, you want to make sure that the budget you've allocated makes sense, right? Do you actually have those things in place? Is the layout kind of what you anticipated? So you're kind of confirming your business plan through that process as well. You talked about bringing in third parties to kind of confirm things. On that note, are you doing that after your inspection and only on things that you have questions on, or do you just have a standard practice to bring in certain trades on every single property?
It's a very good practice, John, that, you bring the trades in. For example, someone with my background could do the mechanical, could do, that assessment and structural, but somebody, a plumber, a plumbing company should be able to go and like pull toilets and camera lines and see if there's roots in the lines. On the properties that are like 30, 40 years old, that's a very common problem, right? Be as thorough as you can. Again, like you pay some price upfront, but at least you know what to expect. The worst thing is that when you're walking in blind, because basically that's what you do when you walk 20-50% of the units, you don't do a thorough assessment, you don't bring trades in to to use their own expertise to leverage that, to understand the extent of the issues that the property has.
I appreciate that. Second question here is, what would make you run away? You're at a property, you're touring it. This is assuming you're an investor, or if you're advising an investor, what's one thing you see it, you tell that investor run?
Systemic plumbing issues. Like, for example, one thing that I can think of particularly, like pinholes in a water lines. So when you have pinholes, due to the, I guess, quality of the pipes or the quality of the water that's corrosive, those leaks don't resurface immediately. So by the time that you see the wet spot on the wall or on a ceiling, if it's coming from upstairs, there's mold that's already built behind that wall. I've seen very nightmarish situations caused by those pinhole leaks, which are like sometimes you deal with like 20 or 30 at a time on a properties like 200-300 apartment homes. Those are gonna be the worst, right? You're also looking at vacant apartments that are cannibalized. This is also something that I've experienced in the past, where ownership groups did not have the funds or didn't want to spend for whatever reason, and the maintenance teams were pushed towards going to vacant apartments and stripping them for parts so they could use them for occupied apartments. Service request. Of course, if you're talking about 1 or 2 apartments, you just do the math, right? It comes down to math. But something that's very, very important, right, is a systemic thing, is going to be building settling, subfloors, major subfloor issues, and mold issues and leaks, consistent leaks. Those could really run up your tab in ways that you don't want to know. Everything else is fixable. It's just about doing an accurate assessment, so you know what your numbers are, right? And if they still make sense within the equation of big purchase, why not? Like, everything could be fixed if you could find the funds.
Yep, good point there.
But yeah, something that could turn into mold or major building shifting, that's something that you should think twice really before you purchase the asset, especially if you want to hold it for like 3 to 5 years, because if there's already an issue, you don't know how much worse that's gonna get next year or 2 years from now. Since it's already existing, right? How much is it gonna be costing you, basically?
Yeah, great point there. Systemic plumbing issues, mold, those kind of things. And it's not mold by itself. It's what's driving the mold. You talked about those pinhole leaks in the pipes, and sometimes those are hard to find as well. And if you see it in multiple units, that's what you mean when you say systemic. It's not that it's just
Yes.
in one unit, it's throughout multiple units, multiple properties. I know we had a 28 unit in my plumbing stacks. We didn't know this right away, but I ended up replacing at least half the plumbing stacks. And that was the property was top floor and down in the first floor. So to open up the plumbing stack for the second floor, I still had to go into the first floor. So it just became a bit of a nightmare, because then you got drywall repair and everything else that goes into, making that correction. So really good points there when it comes to systemic plumbing issues. And it's not to say you can't do the project still, but you probably want to go and redo your numbers to account for what it's actually going to take to remedy that. Hey, last question for you, before we go to our round of insights. What's one thing that's overblown? When you hear investors and they turn away and they're getting due diligence and they get scared by something, what's one thing that maybe is a little overblown and maybe isn't as big of a deal or isn't as difficult of a fix than most people might think?
I think this might sound like a silly situation, but I'm seeing this as a trend to where they're thinking about the investment like they would think about a home that they will be living in, right? So they're not very pragmatic. They're not able to translate to look at just the numbers only. They're looking at the aspect, something that it's outdated, an apartment that's outdated. Of course, just think about how much you could charge for it, or what type of improvement you could make for it. I'm seeing this on several occasions to where investors got like super impressed in a negative way that this is outdated. Well, of course, but you still have to make the numbers work. You still can make the numbers work. Somebody will if you don't, right? And I understand like not wanting to go after a certain, I guess, type of asset. Let's say that it's a CC minor asset, but you also have to think about the upside that you have if you drop like $10,000-$15,000 per apartment unit to bring them up to renovate them. How much more that's going to increase the value of, so it's numbers. But I think I see people stuck into silly type of mindsets. They're not really thinking at like deep issues that they could cost a lot. They're looking at the aesthetics, which at the end of the day, the rentals, right, want them to look as great as possible, but the rentals, right, they're not for to make something like incredibly gorgeous. Not to say that it's wrong for something to look gorgeous, but it's like I wish they were more pragmatic, I should say, right, when they need to be.
Adrian, if I'm reading between the lines of what you're saying, it's they're looking at the aesthetics, but maybe not only focusing on that, but maybe placing too much emphasis on the aesthetic of the look, because you could have a classic style property that cash flows nicely and makes good money, but maybe it doesn't work if you put $10,000 into it and upgrade the kitchen and upgrade the bath. Maybe it only makes another $100 and the numbers just don't pan out. But if you do very little to it and maybe just change the lighting and some other small things, it could still make money. But people, they want the aesthetic, the visual appeal to show like, oh, wow, look at this kitchen, as opposed to just having a property that cash flows. Is that kind of accurately capture what you're saying?
100%.
Awesome. I think this is really good insight, because again, I think when we say value add, I think some people go to, I've got to renovate the kitchens and the bathrooms to make everything look really nice. But that's not the only way to create value, right? You've got to go in there and figure out the right business plan to extract value for that property. And that business plan may not necessarily mean, gut rehabbing or spending a whole bunch of money fixing something if the market dynamics don't really call for that. So great points, man. You gave us a lot of great feedback, Adrian, so far, just talking about what we should be paying attention to, what that relationship with the property management team needs to look like, and what we should pay attention to during our due diligence. For those folks who want to learn more and connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
You could find me on LinkedIn. That's where I spend quite a bit of time. I have a large network there, about 27,000 connections on LinkedIn. I encourage you all to connect with me. It's Adrian C. Danila, Adrian, middle initial C, last name Danila, Danila. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. I'm also on Facebook, same name, and Instagram and the other platforms. I just don't use them as heavily as I use LinkedIn.
All right, let's go to a round of insights. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
A failure. I wanted to do everything so perfectly that I wouldn't accept that things could be done at over, I guess, lesser quality by somebody else that could eventually improve. So I tended, when I first, become a manager, I tended to not allow either, like, set standards, think that everybody should work and, have the same work ethics or knowledge that I had. And then when they weren't able to perform, then, well, it's only gonna get done if I'm gonna do it myself. So that was a very painful process. And when I realized that delegation is the name of the game, and just kind of mentor and train people instead so they could do the work, right? Because it's so many, it's only one of you, right? That turned into a success for me.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
A digital resource, I recommend I recommend applications, apps that are specific to inspections. For example, we're talking about due diligence, right? You definitely want to have some apps on your phone. HappyCo is one of the very well-known apps in multifamily. They're actually servicing like 3.5 million apartments in the United States. So property management companies totaling 3.5 million apartment homes are using HappyCo. So this would be a great resource. AppWork is another great little app. Of course, they're not as large as HappyCo, but I will definitely recommend. So those would be my top two recommendations.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. He has a gift of distilling famous, very successful, I won't say, not necessarily famous, some of them famous too, but very successful people stories. You read that book and you learn the history of, like, the distilled history of 1 or 200 very successful individuals. And there's a lot to learn from. Very practical.
What's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
Getting up in the morning and walking for 75 minutes, especially in bad weather. I woke up this morning at 3:30 because I gotta be at an event that I just got out of. I got up at 3:30 without my alarm clock. Like, literally my internal clock woke me up at 3:30. I did my walk, I took a shower. I was here by 7:30 at the event. Put yourself into a very uncomfortable situation first thing in the morning. The more uncomfortable the situation is, the easier your day is gonna feel like.
All right, love that. Give me your number one insight for managing due diligence.
Hire people that have knowledge in what they're looking for, right? So if it's file audit, find the best, leasing personnel to look at those files. If it's the integrity of the asset, find the best maintenance individuals. Again, and just by outsourcing, it doesn't mean that you pass the problem, like your problem is being taken care of. Have some checks and balances, like hire independent consultants to do at least random checks for you. If you're an investor, don't rely 100% that things are going to happen just by hiring a third-party company.
No, it's great feedback there. All right, well, let's lighten the mood. We talked a lot about due diligence, but where are you located?
I live in Atlanta area, Atlanta,
Atlanta.
Georgia.
All right, Atlanta. Great food options there. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Honestly, I'm not such a big person of going out. That's a surprise question. Like you really like playing it with this. I have a few places that I go to, but it's just regular food. I'm not a sophisticated food eater, right? So any Mexican in my area, like I have a Agave Mexican restaurant off of Lawrenceville Highway. I live in Lilburn, actually. So Agave restaurant, if you check it out, if you Google it, it's a great Mexican food. That'll be one suggestion that I would make. I will encourage you all to stop by and grab a bite.
All right, Agave, we'll have to check that out next time we're in Atlanta. Adrian, you gave us a lot of great information, man. Really great talking to you. I appreciate just the openness and just getting us thinking about the property management side of the business, you know, not just the numbers, but really understanding the maintenance and the preventative maintenance and how that can drive the bottom line. Also understanding what we can do to, you know, do a better job in due diligence, bringing in the right partners, looking at the right things, and making sure that we're ultimately making the right selections, or at least having a good budget to address any questions or concerns or issues that may arise with our properties. Again, if anybody wants to connect with you, we'll put your LinkedIn link in our show notes. Adrian, I want to thank you again for being a great guest and coming on Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.
Same here, John. Thank you so much for having me today.